Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, last week, President Biden announced a major disaster declaration in New Mexico as a result of multiple severe wildfires, including one that was initiated by a U.S. Forest Service prescribed fire that simply escaped control. I want to make sure that the USDA is fully prepared to assist affected communities mitigate potential flood damages before this year's upcoming monsoon season, which starts typically in early July. The Emergency Watershed Protection Program is going to be really essential in that recovery. The village of Ruidoso, which was the subject to a wildfire that caused several fatalities, destroyed over 200 homes, they've already requested EWP assistance, and I'm expecting that a number of communities in northern New Mexico may do so soon. My concern is really that the NRCS office in New Mexico has just never had to deal with this quantity of EWP assistance before and may need additional personnel or other resources to be able to conduct those assessments and implement some recovery on the ground before we get hit by those big thunderstorms. So just given the severity of the fire's destruction and the upcoming monsoon season, I want to ask that you would work with NRCS to make sure that they can meet that urgent need.
Happy to do it, and we are adding additional personnel, Senator, across NRCS to try to beef up significantly the capacities at the state level.
That's great news. One of the other areas that I think is going to be important from the same sort of perspective is, like EWP, other disaster programs within Farm Service Agency. For example, the Livestock Indemnity Program is going to be another one of those places where it's just not set up for the scale of the demand that we're going to see in the immediate after effects of these fires. And so I would also just ask that you look closely at FSA and make sure that they're able to get on the ground and really meet people in these communities and get them to understand what they need to do to access those sorts of programs.
We will certainly do that, and if it turns out that the staffing is not adequate, there are surge teams that we can put in place. We unfortunately and tragically have had far too much experience with this issues, not just in New Mexico, but in many other western states. So we understand and appreciate what we have to do.
No, I appreciate that. One of the related issues I want to raise for you, and it actually goes back to when you were talking about the Rural Partners Network. Many of the communities affected by these particular wildfires are really under-resourced, persistently poor, as I believe you described it. And because of the significant need for assistance in those communities, the New Mexico delegation actually requested that President Biden waive the federal cost share for FEMA assistance. I'd like to be able to work with you to look at the appropriate cost share for USDA disaster programs, simply because these are the exact same communities that on the New Mexico list that you referenced before, that were barely getting by before they were just devastated by these fires. So would like to be able to work with you to develop some guidelines for what might be an appropriate cost share in this case.
No, that's an appropriate request, and to the extent that we have the capacity through our regulations and statutes to do so, we'll be happy to work with you.
Great. To shift gears for a second, on last year's agriculture appropriations bill, this subcommittee encouraged USDA to conduct demonstration programs on dual-use renewable energy systems. These are otherwise known as agrivoltaics. I wanted to ask, does USDA have enough funding for the renewable energy infrastructure and the research expertise to really conduct some of these demonstration programs that we've looked at through this committee?
Well, I think it has the expertise. I don't know that we necessarily have the resources. It's just why part of what would be involved here would be NIFA, our National Institute of Food and Agriculture, as well as our ARS facilities. And I'm frank to say we think that we need more resources in those areas across the board, not just in this area, but in terms of staffing, in terms of facilities, and in terms of the capacity to do more work with land-grant universities.
Madam Chair, I hope the committee will look at this. We've had a number of places around the country where there has been a direct conflict between taking land out of production to do renewable projects. And we've seen great success in a few places where they've actually been able to effectively produce energy and farm on the same footprint and increase the income for the farmer as a result. And I think it has a lot of promise.